We have turned our attention to getting our Dynasty teams ready for this upcoming season, whether we're contending, rebuilding, reloading, it doesn't matter. We're trying to make the best Dynasty teams that we possibly can. These are the guys that we are most commonly recommending that you buy. Obviously, some of this is team dependent on your team blueprints when we are doing these. So we're going to talk about some of the best buy lows in Dynasty Fantasy Football so that regardless if you're getting your team reviewed or not, you know who to buy, you know who to go get. Do us a huge favor, drop a like, make sure you're subscribed as well if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. The more we think about it, the more we think that Devon Achane is going to be all right. And this is somewhat of a hot take right now, I think, in Dynasty Fantasy Football. And it's not necessarily that his value's dropped a whole lot, right? When you're looking at his market value, for example, over on Keep Trade Cut, Devon Achane is still valued at the end of the second round, right? When you're going over and looking at the Flock consensus rankings for Dynasty Superflex leagues, he's still valued right there at 24 at the end of the second round, right? When you're looking at the Dynasty Domain ADP from our drafts, he's still being valued right there at the end of the second round. So I think the market is pretty safe with Devon Achane. I think it's pretty set where they have him priced right now. It's not really a buy low for Devon Achane. Some of these, again, people mistake buys videos for buy low videos. Some of these are buy lows. Some of these are buy at price. And the price is the reason that we're buying all these guys. Now, what's interesting about Devon Achane's price is when you're looking at the guys going around him, he goes around a lot of quarterbacks and a couple tight ends and McBride and Bowers and startups. But when you're looking specifically at the wide receivers here, Garrett Wilson goes around him. The closest guys are Olave, George Pickens, Tet McMillan to him. Emeka Egbuka has been going in the third of our drafts. CeeDee Lamb has started to slide down there to the mid-second where Devon Achane is closer to where he's been going. And I think for Achane, it's more of a roster construction and ceiling play than anything. I'm not necessarily pointing rebuilds and reloads towards Devon Achane to buy him at this point in time in the offseason. I would much rather a rebuild, reload, have some other guys in that range, like a Tet McMillan. Even a Martin Hampton I would prefer over Devon Achane straight up still in Dynasty, but I'd rather a reload by Tet McMillan. I might rather a reload have Jackson Dart, or maybe Pickens even. Sometimes we're recommending guys like Egbuka. Garrett Wilson's a big one for us for reloads, rebuilds right now. So there are guys that we'd rather have for rebuilds and reloads than Devon Achane. But from a roster construction standpoint, if you're going into this Dynasty Fantasy Football season and you plan to contend, the nice thing about Devon Achane, especially if you have, a high-end standard value team, anywhere from high-end standard value, enhanced value to elite value, is Devon Achane, the guys you have in that range, like Tet McMillan may be the second or third wide receiver on your team. So you might be in your last starting wide receiver spot putting Tet McMillan in there or putting George Pickens in there. Or maybe you're flexing one of those guys in a more shallow league. The roster construction play here is to flex running back everywhere you can. So if you move Devon Achane over to your running back room and you take out a wide receiver that's going in that late second, early third range, you're bumping down all of your current starting running backs. And so you may have, for example, somebody like Cam Scadaboo in your starting lineup right now. Maybe you have Breece Hall, Quinshon Judkins, Chase Brown, Chris McCaffrey in that second running back slot. They move down to your flex. Now you've got another running back. The idea here is when we're building our contending dynasty teams, we want to start as many running backs as we can. And if you'll remember last season, during the season in Dynasty Fantasy Football, I think last season was the hardest market to get running backs, acquire running backs midseason that I think I've ever seen. Do you agree with that?
Agreed.
It was dang near impossible to get a hold of running backs in Dynasty last year. And so with Achane, he's a guy that when you're looking at his production the last couple of years, he has been producing at an elite level. Last year, he played 16 games. And the difference between last year and years prior is when you're looking at his receiving upside, which he so obviously has receiving upside. Last year, he had 488 receiving yards compared to the year before, 592. He still had 85 targets, had 87 in 2024. The big difference with Achane last year, compared to the year before especially, was his rushing volume increased. He got 35 more carries, but he became more efficient, right? He had 1,350 yards last year. And so averaged 5.7 yards per attempt on the ground. And to me, I think that makes Achane, we know he's a good runner. I think that makes him a little bit more sustainable for contending teams this year. If Devon Achane was in a safe situation, he would be a 1-2 turn guy right now. I think everybody probably agrees with that because he's only 24 and a half years old. And when you're looking at his last couple seasons, again, he scored 320 PPR points last year. He's the running back 5 and the running back 5 the year before that. So consistently a top 5 running back in fantasy football. And the situational volatility is obviously baking in a discount to his price. And I think with how difficult it is to buy running backs, especially in this range, I think we like Achane, especially for contending teams, over some of those like top tier foundational wide receivers that we see going there. And so that's why Achane is a buy for us. It's more of a roster construction move, more of a ceiling play for our contending teams. Because when it comes down to it and you're building your contending rosters in Dynasty, it is all about your production ceiling. What can your team do on a week-to-week basis? You can do as well as you can from a roster construction standpoint, getting yourself into the playoffs and getting a bye. But then you get into the playoffs and there is an exorbitant amount of luck that comes in there, right? It's a lot of luck. And so giving yourself the best chance by having these high ceiling assets that could go off for, anywhere from 15 to 40 points a week like Devon Achane can, especially with the high floor that you bake into a running back compared to a wide receiver like Ted McMillan, whose floor is 5 points. Devon Achane, I understand that he can have some floor games as well, especially when Tua wasn't playing. Generally, though, he's going to get a lot of touches than offense this year, and I think his floor is going to be much higher than a wide receiver that you're drafting there. So the floor-ceiling combination for contending teams is just what we like right now. So we've been giving Devon Achane a lot. The only time we've really mentioned Achane this offseason is we'd pivot from him to Amari Hampton. I still would do that and take Amari Hampton. But generally for contending teams, I think Devon Achane, if you have a wide receiver, tight end in this range, if you have a tight end and you don't have an elite value team, you could go get Devon Achane. Quarterbacks even, you could trade a quarterback straight up for Devon Achane and go get Sam Darnold, Matt Stafford starting your second superflex spot. I like all of these moves for Devon Achane. Not really a buy low, but more of a roster construction play. I do not think it's going to be possible to buy Devon Achane. As soon as week 1, 2, 3 happens, and I think people are going to see, oh man, the guy's still producing, I don't think you're buying him. And there's always a chance, of course, that this kind of blows up in flames and I look like an idiot because Devon Achane is in a, Bobby Sloak offense where he's not doing anything because he doesn't have Mike McDaniel anymore. I really don't think it's going to happen. I'm going to bet on the talent here. I'm going to bet that he transcends. I'm going to bet the receiving upside gives him a high floor and the rushing upside he showcased last year gives him an even higher ceiling. And from a roster construction standpoint, I will buy Devon Achane in Dynasty.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest arguments against him, or one of the most popular ones, is that Malik Willis is there. Malik Willis is a rushing QB. We don't know if he can throw the ball. Therefore, Devon Achane is a regression candidate. And I would probably try to... I would just recommend that not be the sole argument that we have for not having Devon Achane as a contending team, especially because I don't know if you guys checked the NFL draft, but the best wide receiver or the best receiving asset in that offense is Devon Achane. And Malik Willis might be limited as a passer, but I'm telling you right now, 100% the best receiving option for Malik Willis to consistently and easily get the ball to is going to be Achane. So if you're going to see any regression on the ground because Malik Willis is running it 200 times, then you're probably going to see a bump up in receiving capability and receiving upside because he's going to be pretty much the sole dump-off option there for Willis when they went out of their way to not draft any receiving weapons whatsoever. And please don't tell me Chris Bell.
Chris Bell.
I know Chris Bell
Nathan
is
Chris
there. So next guy we're going to have here is Tyler Shuck. I think Shuck ended up being one of the biggest non-rookie winners of the NFL draft, specifically because of the Jordan Tyson selection in the first round. New Orleans had been one of those teams that was mocked, potentially Jeremiah Love if he was going to fall there, or a receiving weapon in, Tyson or Lemon or Tate. And lo and behold, we see Jordan Tyson ends up making it to the New Orleans Saints, and he's going to be there alongside Chris Olave. I think what we've seen historically over the last 5 or so years with New Orleans is ever since they went and invested in Chris Olave, they really haven't had anybody else there as a consistent receiving option. It's kind of been Chris Olave and then the rest of the field, and they kind of got away with it because you had the receiving capability of Alvin Kamara, which really helped open things up as well. And that's kind of gone away. As we saw from last year, Kamara looked like he kind of lost a step. That's going to reign true as they bring in ETN this year, and Alvin Kamara is probably going to take a back seat. His workload is going to be, diminished further and further until he kind of, continues to fall off a cliff. The cliff happened last year. But with Shuck, for a guy last year who was able to produce at a pretty impressive level, for a guy that was thrown into a situation that was less than ideal, you're now looking at his personnel that he's working with offensively getting so much better across the board. He was doing this with Chris Olave and Chris Olave alone. Again, Kamara last year was a non-factor. He actually was banged up for quite a bit of time there towards the end of the year, and then they really, towards the end of the season, started to lean on him and his high level of passing volume. He threw the ball in games of 12 and 13 against Atlanta and Miami, 43 and 38 times. Week 15 and 16, 32 and 49 times. And then week 18, again, 35 times. The first time that he stepped onto the field, 50% snap share. He threw the ball 30 times against Tampa in week 8. This is going to be a high passing volume offense with a lot of room to grow for Tyler Shuck's floor, in my opinion, given the weapons that they've provided him on the outside.
Yep.
Again, we kind of talked about this a lot during the draft show, and with kind of what are the repercussions of Jordan Tyson going to New Orleans? What does this mean for Tyson's production? I mean, let's forget Tyson at this point in his fantasy production. Let's just talk about what Tyson does for a Kellen Moore offense. What we've seen historically in Kellen Moore offenses dating back to, again, even the year that they won the Super Bowl in Philly just a couple years ago, like you had 2 solid seasons for A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. You go back to Dallas and you have multiple productive wide receivers at that point as well. We've highlighted this multiple times. Like I have historically not been a big Kellen Moore fan, in that like I knew eventually he was going to get a head coaching opportunity and I wasn't going to be a believer in it. Well, I sure as heck am a believer in the fantasy upside, because when you're looking at the offenses that he likes to run, he just loves to throw the crap out of the ball. To a point, again, where like Mike McCarthy not so jokingly said, I want to win football games. He wants to run up the board, run up the scoreboard. And that's, again, whether he wanted to run up the scoreboard or not last season, it's kind of up to interpretation. They were down in a good number of these games as well. And they were forced to throw the ball quite a bit. I think New Orleans is going to improve this year. I think, again, you just have to look at their personnel, at least offensively, and be like, yeah, that's going to be a better, more explosive offense at least. We'll see what they can do defensively. But if they end up, being in a lot of high-scoring matchups, this is going to be really, really solid for everybody there. And for Tyler Shuck, who I think demonstrated not just some ability to be a consistent thrower of the football, but also some mobility as well. Not only can he escape pressure and kind of work it down the field outside the pocket, he can also... he's got some escapability to run it down the field. He had a couple rushing touchdowns in week 2 against Tampa. He had one at the end of the year as well, like 3 total rushing touchdowns. And again, just half of the season that he started, 186 rushing yards. Like, again, that's nothing that's absolutely insane. Like, you're going to see that settle around like the 350, 400 range probably next year or in 2026. But this is something that we like to look at for some of those higher end guys. What I see when I see what Tyler Shuck offers from a fantasy perspective is very similar upside-wise to someone like a Bo Nix, right? If you remember, Bo Nix came in, he was an older prospect. Not everybody really trusted what he was able to do as a passer. He kind of answers those questions, and then the bonus with Bo Nix is his mobility kind of blew everybody out of the water, which it should not have blown everybody out of the water because we saw his mobility and his rushing capability at Oregon, but that's beside the point. We haven't really seen that with Shuck until we saw it in this offense with Kellen Moore. And that's really promising when you're talking about raising his floor. Look, he's not a rushing upside quarterback. Rushing capability is different than rushing upside. But with those weapons now that he has the wide receiver position paired with that rushing capability, which is going to help raise his floor, you're looking at his potential value upside being in that range of like your Purdy's, your Lawrence's, your Bo Nix's, and they're building that offense with the hopes that that's the type of quarterback that he can be for the Saints long term. So I get he was an older rookie. I get he was in college for years and years. He was backing up Justin Herbert. That's how long he's been in college. But at this point, you're looking at a starting quarterback in a situation where Kellen Moore loves to throw the ball, and it's only going to be up from here, guys. You can't look at a situation like last year and say it's going to be any worse than that. And he was a very startable quarterback after the bye after week 11. Like you wanted him in your super flex spot. So we like Tyler Shuck a lot. I think he was a big winner, and expect to hear us talk about him quite a bit more this offseason.
And again, a lot of these buys are team dependent, and we give some of these buys for rebuilds, reloads. I love Tyler Shuck for rebuilds and reloads right now as well, because I do think he's going to be a value win in this season. It's all team dependent. And again, if you want to get your team reviewed by Nathan and I personally and get a plan for your Dynasty team, right now we are running a special where any new members get a free Blueprint Premium, so the full package with the Infinite Blueprint as well. You can also get our Rookie Draft Analyzer tool. If you haven't had your rookie drafts yet, you can use this tool in your rookie drafts. You also get the full Bakery database, but you get the trade calculator to make trades on the site, the Flock Tools. You get one-on-one access to Nathan and I, so you can ask us about trades anytime you want. You get access to the Discord community where you can run trades by them as well. It's a great resource to have if you play Dynasty, you want second opinions on things, and you want to be a part of a community that loves, lives, and breathes Dynasty Fantasy Football. You can jump in and join with code DOMAIN. I've got the link down in the pinned comment. Again, you do get a free Blueprint Premium right now. It's our little special we're running for draft week, or draft season, I should say. So go check it out. We're going to talk about Tucker Kraft now. Kraft, to me, is an easy, classic Dynasty buy. Kraft, when you're looking at what he did last season when he was healthy, he was when he played, he was the tight end 4 in fantasy football. Averaged 14.6 PPR points per game. From a target share standpoint, he was 12th, 11th in target share, 12th in targets. But really, from a yard standpoint, you remember Tucker Kraft on all of those primetime Packers games that we had to watch, catching all of those big plays. Obviously, a lot of this was skewed by 1 or 2 games, right? He did have a couple really big games, and then he had some down games. And so the consistency for Tucker Kraft is definitely something that you can talk about. But receiving touchdowns, he was first. Yards per target, second. Yards per outrun, second. So he was probably the most efficient tight end in the NFL from a fantasy football perspective. Now, you can make the argument for or against Tucker Kraft based on his production or whatever. You're looking at some of the other guys there. Trey McBride obviously was the tight end 1. Brock Bowers was the tight end 2 on a per-game basis. And then, you add some of the other guys in there. Tyler Warren and Harold Fannin, like Tucker Kraft outproduced those guys last year. And I'm pretty sure Kyle Pitts was the tight end 3 in all these categories. And so you can make an argument for or against him based on all of this. Or you can just lean on the fact that he's a classic Dynasty buy because he's coming off of an injury. He showed a lot of promise before the injury. And as of 1 hour ago on Sirius XM or something like that, Sirius XM NFL Radio, Bryant Gutekunst said that Kraft's a little bit ahead of schedule. He's expected to be back early in the season for the Packers.
There you go.
And here's the thing. Number one, people are going to get wind of that. Maybe not by the time you watch this video, but they're going to get wind of it. His value will bump up just a little bit more. But as soon as he steps on the field, he's going up in value at least half a round in Dynasty, if not a full round. And he may not even be a buy to sell. Like, you're getting him cheap enough to where you can buy him as a standard value team, where you don't have an enhanced or elite value team. You don't have that high of a value share, but you can buy a tight end like Tucker Kraft, and he might end up being your top 5 tight end that you get for a super good discount because he tore his ACL last year. Now, you can expect, of course, from a production standpoint this year, when he does get back onto the field, you can probably expect a small production dip.
There's going to be a ramp-up period.
But there has to be some consistency in our logic here, because are you a Matthew Golden fan?
Not really.
Are you a Christian Watson fan?
No.
Are you a Jaden Reed fan?
Used to be, but he's very limited.
Well, he's just also very boom bust, right?
Yeah.
Which every weapon there is. But we don't like the Packers wide receivers for fantasy. Tucker Kraft is the guy we like. And we don't have to like anybody technically, but Tucker Kraft really does seem like the best wide receiver in that offense to me. And also just schematically, I think they're going to be pretty intentional about using Tucker Kraft. But again, the value bump's going to happen when he comes back and when he starts playing. This is the case with any injured Dynasty asset. Anybody who shows promise before an injury, gets injured, and then steps back onto the field, gains value when they step back onto the field. Every single time in Dynasty, you can set your clock to it. It's how everybody's minds operate in Dynasty fantasy football. So this might be a flip candidate, or you might just hold through it. I love him for rebuilds and reloads because, again, it's a value win. And if you have to make a ton of trades to get out of a hard rebuild, you can just flip him again to a contender. Or, again, you can hold him, and he might end up being a viable tight end option for your Dynasty teams, especially in tight end premium leagues. And so this is, again, just a classic Dynasty market play where, regardless of what he actually does when he comes back this year, number one, I think he's going to be good. I think Tucker Kraft's going to be good. I actually really like Tucker Kraft. But regardless of that, Tucker Kraft is being ranked probably lower than what his ceiling is in Dynasty fantasy football. He's going in the 6th or 7th round a lot of times in Dynasty startups. The tight ends that you're typically seeing going around him right now I don't like hardly any of them as much. I've got him at the 7-2 according to like some domain draft ADP that I have handy. The other guys even close to that are Gadsden and Laporta. And the guy ahead of him right now is Fannin. With Fannin having Casey Concepcion come there, I love moving from Fannin to Kraft right now with probably a down tier because they're going 2 rounds apart, a round and a half apart according to the ADP that I have. So I think there's lots of opportunities to, and not to mention from a rebuilding and reloading standpoint, the reason I like Kraft again, because he's going to go up in value. Most of the guys in the 6th, 7th round range are contending assets. So when you're flipping contending assets for a rebuilding, reloading asset that's going to go up in value, it's kind of slim pickings through this area. But Tucker Kraft is one where I know I can play the market on him and get a value win. And so because of that, I like buying Tucker Kraft right now in Dynasty. I've been giving him as a target for contending teams and rebuilding teams alike. And if you have the opportunity to go get Tucker Kraft, kind of where nobody's talking about him right now, I would see what his price is. Definitely send some feelers and see if you can't play the market on a guy that should be coming back from injury just fine, if I had to guess.
Yeah, next guy we're going to have here is Ashton Gency. We talked about him in a Riser Stock Up video after Clint Kubiak was officially announced to be the new head coach there for the Raiders. Now you've got Fernando Mendoza coming in, first overall pick. Kirk Cousins is expected to probably be the starter there, at least for a good chunk, a good portion of the first season. Maybe if they end up going on a run, maybe Fernando ends up getting an opportunity there. We'll see, but with Gency and what he was able to accomplish last season, honestly, in hindsight's always 2020. That was incredibly impressive. 14.4 points per game given that situation was absolutely unbelievable. You saw a similar type of performance from Bijan his rookie year, where everybody was like freaking out so much because Algier kept taking away from him, and what he was able to do in that situation, despite touchdowns getting vultured left and right from him because Arthur Smith hated him, and he still produced. Like, these are what these elite caliber running back prospects can do as a rookie. And again, even though we had these high expectations for him from a fantasy perspective as, potentially a running back one, he finishes, as the RB16 in points per game. He's still, when it's all said and done and you look back, you're like, dang, I can't believe he even pulled that off. Because when you watch, when you watch those Raiders games, dude, they just knew every time he was running the ball. Every single time, because it's the only thing that they could do right. It was the only thing that they could do well. Outside of the games where maybe Trey Tucker every fourth game would have like a 30-point game because he'd, take one to the house 80 yards. But there was nobody else in that offense. There was nobody else there. We were hopeful that Brock Bowers would help take some of the pressure off of like what Gency was going to be expected to do there. And he missed dang near half the season. So that didn't help either. But now that it's done, now that his rookie season is in the books, I think you're looking at Ashton Gency and what he might be capable of doing this season and what's expected to be a much better situation with much better play calling. It's wheels up for Gency. Finished again in total points as the RB11 last year, so he was a running back one still, despite that terrible situation. This is somebody that, again, very similar to Devon Achane. This is a buy at price. This isn't necessarily a buy low. Everybody knows where Gency's being priced at. He's usually a early second round type of guy. Here's why we like Gency so much, though, and why we have him on this video is everybody is always so hyper-focused on the new kid on the block. And right now, that's Jeremiah Love. And Jeremiah Love is awesome in his own right. This is nothing against Jeremiah Love whatsoever. But if you want to go get a non-Gibbs, a non-Bijan, elite upside running back, Ashton Gency is your guy because he is by far outside of those top two guys the most insulated running back in Dynasty Fantasy Football alongside Jeremiah Love, and Love is pricier. He is pricier. There is technically upwards of a half-round difference between them, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're talking about each individual spot there at the 1-2 turn in your startup drafts from an ADP perspective, there's a big difference there. And again, we've seen some of the prices that the 101 has gone for. Some of them, in cupcake leagues, you see the 101 sometimes go for super cheap, but you do see often a lot of people overpaying for that pick specifically, right? It's kind of the classic thing we see every year. A lot of people tank their teams for the 101, and a lot of teams did that this year, and they would pay a crazy, crazy up-tier price to go get that guy. We see that way less often for Gency. When people go acquire Gency, it often tends to be a much more palatable price. Again, I don't want to over-exhaust the situation and just tell you again and again. You guys know what the situation is at this point in Vegas, and we just have to see it come to fruition. But ultimately, there's nobody else competing for touches there. Mike Washington is a guy that's going to rake up maybe 15% of the carries there because every running backfield is a committee in the NFL at this point in time. But Gency is going to be as close to a bell cow running back as you're going to see, I think, in the NFL. 266 carries last year in that offense. Expect that to go up. It's going to be real nice, and I can't wait.
All right, so this one we kind of need to connect some logic on, I think, because I don't know if you've heard this. You may have. We're not the highest on Dejon Stribling.
Oh, really?
No, we're not. In our videos, we've kind of said that we think he's not a great pick. But if we don't like Stribling and we don't like Pearsall, which, by the way, if I had to guess, I think Pearsall would be pretty productive much quicker than
I
Dejon Stribling.
would much rather bet on Pearsall than Stribling.
100%. So like, if we have to choose one, we're choosing Pearsall. By the way, Pearsall is a better wide receiver, but that's not the point because Pearsall is not even the best wide receiver there. And no, I'm not talking about George Kittle, who when he's healthy is probably the best wide receiver there, or Christian McCaffrey, who when he's healthy is probably the best wide receiver there as well. Because when you're thinking about it, I mean, Christian McCaffrey had over 100 targets last year. Christian McCaffrey was the wide receiver one. He led the team in receiving yards last year.
Yeah.
And people forget that, which is fine. Christian McCaffrey is a wide receiver. Don't forget that.
130 targets.
It's ridiculous, Nate. So, who is the actual like wide receiver one? Because McCaffrey's a running back and George Kittle's a tight end. Of course, it's Mike Evans. And I think the reason, and this it really is, part of the reason that people are propping up Dejon Stribling is because it's who's going to get the targets. Somebody has to get the targets. Who's going to get the targets there? And I honestly think that the targets there in San Francisco just could be extremely concentrated. That's what I think is going to happen because, we're not going to dock these guys for injury. Kittle looks like he's going to be available for week 1 at this point. That's what all signs are pointing to. But even if he isn't,
Lynch basically said it. So.
Look at the receiving last year for these guys. Look at the receiving. Their leading receiver, Christian McCaffrey, is coming back with 100 receptions, 129 targets, and 924 yards and 7 receiving touchdowns. Juwan Jennings was the second wide receiver there in that offense. Now, Juwan Jennings had 643 yards. That's it in 15 games. George Kittle was the third leading wide receiver there in 11 games. 11 games, he had 628 yards and he was the third leading wide receiver. And you know who's number 4? Kendrick Bourne. Kendrick Bourne came in off the street and outproduced Ricky Pearsall. And people think that, again, when you're looking at the target distribution and passing distribution in San Francisco, it is not a stretch at all to say that it's going to be extremely concentrated and that McCaffrey, Kittle, and Evans are going to be the top 3 guys there. And it's probably those are going to be the only guys that are fantasy productive because even Juwan Jennings, who was in 15 games last year, he was their second leading wide receiver technically because George Kittle got hurt.
90 targets, that was it.
And he was the wide receiver 33.
I mean, that's right
33.
That is right up Mike Evans' alley at this point in his career. He's probably going to be a 100 to 120 target guy and will easily be the second option there. And that's all she wrote. Like that, those are the only relevant guys that are going to be there from a fantasy perspective.
I cannot wait for this to play out. It's just so,
it's going to be great.
I just think it's so predictable.
People are going to have like their Dejon Stribling jerseys on the couch and they're going to watch the games and be like,
they're going to be like, wait, he only got 2 targets. He's out there blocking. Mike Evans is not out there to block though. Mike Evans is out there to catch touchdowns.
Yeah.
And he still can. I mean, that's the thing about Evans is he has hamstrings made of ham, but he still can catch football.
Hamstrings, yeah, there you go. Nice.
Yeah, no, everybody knows hamstrings are shot, right? And last year he played in 8 games. He only had 30 receptions, had 61 targets, only had 368 yards. Obviously ended his 1,000-yard streak, right? 2014 to 2024, what a freaking streak for Mike Evans. And last year, the hamstrings were too much to overcome, and he just couldn't. He could not get back on the field.
And the collarbone.
Sure.
The collarbone's really what got him at the end.
Yeah,
so.
And it's tough, right? Because he is at that point in his career right now where he's 32 going on 33 years old and not the most, I don't know. I think he is a guy who could hit a cliff pretty hard. But he got paid decent money to go to San Francisco.
Yeah.
And why would they have paid him decent money if they didn't plan to utilize him? Not to mention, even 32-and-a-half-year-old Mike Evans is a better wide receiver than Ricky Pearsall and Dejon Stribling at this point in their careers.
I would bet, just historically speaking, Evans usually has a hamstring stint for a few weeks every single year. And it was weeks 4 to 6 last year before he went down with the collarbone, which kept him sidelined for longer. Yeah. But, in that nice little mini stretch, you're probably looking at Pearsall being a really nice flex option.
Yeah, he will be.
Outside of that, games. I'm sorry, guys. I mean, Evans at the end of the year, don't forget Tampa wanted to re-sign Evans, and he decided to go to San Fran.
Also,
19, 14, 12 points, 12, 9, and 7 targets in weeks 15 to 17 once he came back from that collarbone injury. So it's not like he came back and didn't do absolutely anything. He didn't fall off a cliff. He just wasn't available. So
there's a free agent signing wide receiver in San Francisco. I haven't even mentioned his name yet. Christian Kirk, who I don't think is irrelevant either. I don't think he's going to be fantasy relevant, but I think he's going to take some targets.
It just makes it more and more crowded there. Right?
It's honestly, it's in some ways crowded, but the top of the target distribution is going to be very concentrated between McCaffrey, Kittle, and probably Mike Evans. And so Mike Evans, I think, is the wide receiver to own there. When you're talking about his price right now compared to the other wide receivers in San Francisco, Mike Evans is probably worth right now a second in Dynasty fantasy football. He's not ranked super high at all. He's very achievable. You can get him pretty easily. And I think that's what is honestly, he's being priced next to Romeo Doubs, Isaiah Likely, Quentin Johnson, Zach Charbonnet. So he's being priced behind Ricky Pearsall by a couple rounds. I don't know where he is compared to Stribling. Stribling is probably behind him by a decent amount. Obviously, it doesn't necessarily matter. I think he's going to be the most productive wide receiver there this year. And can you look up his contract just for me real quick to kind of drive this home? Because they really did. Tampa Bay wanted him back pretty bad. He mentioned that. They really did invest a significant amount of money into Mike Evans this season, and I can't promise he's going to stay healthy. But what I can promise is if he is healthy, I think he's going to be Brock Purdy. I think he's going to be Brock Purdy's second, third favorite target behind Chris McCaffrey and George Kittle.
It's a fake 3-year, $42 million deal, $14 million guaranteed. So essentially, if they cut him after this year and make it a 1-year deal, he will have made $14 million.
So there you go. And it's not huge. That's not huge money for a wide receiver, obviously, at the tail of his career. But clearly, they brought him in to play a role this year. I think the same thing can be said about Christian Kirk, but I think Mike Evans is going to be the red zone target there, and obviously Christian McCaffrey will be as well, and Kittle. I think if you're talking about one of these guys being flexible, it's definitely Mike Evans. So from a contending standpoint, I like buying him right now in Dynasty Fantasy Football because he's pretty much dirt cheap.
Yeah, and last guy we're going to have here, I actually want to do a little, I want to have some fun doing some comparison stats here. We've got a wide receiver currently who's going in the third round of ADP. His name's Emeka Egbuka. He's 23 years old. Last year, again, factoring out all of his great games, he had 11.5 points per game, which was 35th in the NFL. He ran 30 yards per route. He ran 30 routes per game, had about 55 receiving yards per game. And his touchdown rate was about 0.35, which was 32nd among wide receivers. And then this other wide receiver who's 25 years old averaged 13.6 points per game, which was good for 17th among wide receivers last season. 8.75 targets, 63 receiving yards per game, and 33 routes run per game as well. I mean, again, compared to Emeka Egbuka, Wan'Dale Robinson is a guy who's young, just got a really solid extension. Actually, in the range of Romeo Doubs, actually, when you're looking at the extension money, comparing those two. And he goes to a situation in Tennessee where it's wide open. I mean, Jim DK went on some runs last year where he was productive. Alec Iomanner had some productive days. Calvin Ridley had a few weeks before he went down with the injury where he was productive as well. Cam Ward has his shortcomings. He's got to develop. But in a Brian Daboll offense, man, I'm telling you, Wan'Dale Robinson, don't overlook him. Everybody's going to have eyes on Carnell Tate, as you should. We really like Carnell Tate in this situation. We're super duper excited about it. There is room, in our opinion, for a second wide receiver to be productive in that offense and a Brian Daboll offense. Again, Brian Daboll brought him to Tennessee. Wan'Dale Robinson wanted to go to Tennessee because of his background history with Brian Daboll. If you remember, before last season, Wan'Dale's had 140 targets the last 2 years, 140 targets, identical, 92 and 93 receptions, 1,000 yards in 2025 versus 700 the year prior. His efficiency on a per reception basis took a massive step up his fourth year. His touchdowns didn't even go up. He had one more touchdown in 2025 than he did in 2024. So you're literally looking at him going from a wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 3, to a high-end wide receiver 2, in that situation for a couple of factors: his efficiency, yards per reception, and Malik Neighbors going down with that injury. I don't think that Wan'Dale Robinson is going to command 140 targets again this season. What I do think is going to happen is you're going to see him playing alongside Carnell Tate. He's going to be running out of the slot. A nice security blanket for Carnell Tate as the second option there in that offense, probably commanding 100 to 120 targets on the season, which merits flex-worthy upside and opportunity. And he's being priced in a range that is super duper affordable. I mean, you're looking at some of the guys in market where he's being priced around. There are guys that just have massive question marks. Jaden Higgins, that's just a breakout hopeful, honestly. You've got guys like Denzel Boston who are in way worse situations, who have more competition, actually, because you got Fannin and Concepcion as well. Here, it's just Carnell Tate. You're looking at Jaden Reed, who he's only ever been a hopeful. And you look at the money that they just paid him when they extended him, it's about half of the money that Wan'Dale's getting paid. So from an investment perspective, you're looking at Wan'Dale getting probably a lot more involved consistently than a guy like Jaden Reed, who's more of a gadget player. Xavier Worthy, a breakout hopeful. Josh Downs, I mean, Wan'Dale and Josh Downs are probably the most comparable assets in fantasy right now. And honestly, you've got less competition in Tennessee for Wan'Dale Robinson than you do for Josh Downs in Indy. So there are a lot of guys in that price range that I just prefer Wan'Dale straight up because he's the one that has produced at a consistent basis for the last couple of years. And it was way, way better last season. Again, I understand he was a wide receiver 1 in that situation. I'm not saying he's going to replicate it again and be the wide receiver 14 in total points. But if he takes a step down, you're talking about a high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2 in an offense where he has experience with Dable and he's going to want to scheme him up. So don't sleep on Wan'Dale this season. Don't forget that he still exists in that offense. And believe it or not, there are still other relevant wide receivers in offenses where there is an alpha wide receiver. And this is one where I do think Cam Ward will be able to provide enough volume for that to be the case.
So again, our favorite buys in Dynasty, not necessarily buy lows in Dynasty. Some of them are buys at price, but for one reason or another, these guys, we're targeting on our own Dynasty teams. We're telling you to target on yours. And so it's up to you whether or not you're going to go send offers and get these guys on your team. But we like their current price right now. Again, do us a huge favor. Drop a like on the video. Make sure you're subscribed. We're trying to make Dynasty Fantasy Football bigger than regular fantasy football. So do those two things to help us out. We love you guys. We appreciate you. We'll see you here on the next vid on Thursday.